Joining me now, NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster, who is in Minneapolis. Also with me, University of Alabama law professor Joyce Vance and former senior FBI official and former U.S. attorney Chuck Rosenberg. Great to have all three of you with us on the second day of the trial. Joyce, I'll start with you. You described Donald Williams today as a devastating witness for the prosecution. Explain that to us, and what about that back and forth over the type of chokehold from the defense, the significance of that, if you see any?
Well, this is the prosecution's case, so of course you'd expect the witnesses to be good. But Mr. Williams was particularly effective, and on cross-examination, he did, I think, a great job of swatting away defense efforts to paint him as an agitated, angry black man or as someone who was going beyond his expertise, sort of a weird little exchange that they had there since he's not really formally qualified as an expert. Williams talked about what he saw, how it made him feel, and ultimately the fact that he was forced to call the cops on the cops because of his concerns. There's a subtle point, I think, there, which is that any effort to argue that Williams was anti-police will ultimately fail, because what he did when he saw something happening that was wrong was he called the police. But he rejected. He was concerned about this one police officer who he viewed as a criminal. Just devastating testimony for the prosecution to obtain.
Yeah, Joyce, this is the second day in a row where you had somebody see what was playing out and express concern. You had Williams today. Yesterday, you had that 911 dispatcher who called the sergeant to say, look, the video feed that is coming from that area is troubling. I don't see any movement there. These back-to-back narratives that something early on was troubling just adds more to the prosecution case, does it not? That people who were observing this were noticing a troubling pattern here.
It does, and Mr. Williams' demeanor is important. You know, he was so persistent but almost polite early on, trying to get the officer's attention. He gets more agitated, but he never really rolls over into anger. And all of the jurors are sitting there asking themselves, how would they have asked in his situation? He seems to have struck really the right balance. It's, I think, incredible in the circumstances that he continues, knowing that the police, you know, who are engaging in conduct that he's watching could certainly turn upon him. But he continues to ask for them to do something based on his training. That's really important evidence for a jury to see, because they can put themselves in Mr. Williams' shoes and they'll see his credibility.
And of course, Shaq, we heard earlier today from that first underage witness, Darnella. We're not going to use her last name to help protect her identity. She taped that scene on her phone that the world has now seen, the knee on George Floyd's neck. She had some emotional testimony about what she saw today that the rest of the world also saw.
Really emotional testimony. And, you know, these two witnesses are really two key bystanders, because Darnella was the one who recorded it, and Mr. Williams, he was one of the more vocal people on that scene. And when we look at what the jury has been seeing and how they've been reacting, we know that with Mr. Williams, they were connecting with him yesterday. He would turn and make eye contact with them. As far as the reaction to Darnella, well, it was after this moment that they really dialed in.
When I look at George Floyd, I look at my dad, I look at my brothers, I look at my cousins, my uncles, because they are all black. I have a black father, I have a black brother, I have black friends. And I look at that and I look at how that could have been one of them. It's been nights I stayed up apologizing and apologizing to George Floyd for not doing more and not physically interacting and not saving his life. But it's like, it's not what I should have done. It's what he should have done.
According to the two reporters allowed in the room, they say that during that part, all of the jurors seemed very sympathetic at the end of Darnella's testimony. There's been one juror in particular that has been a little bit more expressive, sometimes showing emotion behind her, even through her mask, I should say. And that was definitely a moment that stuck out with them. You get the sense the jury is really paying attention to this very emotional testimony.
A very powerful moment for anyone that was just listening to that. I can't imagine what it was like to see it as well. Chuck, we've heard from powerful testimony from the 911 dispatcher yesterday that I alluded to earlier. 3 other compelling witnesses today. Let's talk about the defense strategy so far. What do you make of the defense team trying to push back on 2 of them?
Well, I'll tell you, Ayman, having tried lots of cases and made my share of mistakes, I saw a big one from the defense counsel. Cross-examinations are hard. Good cross-examinations are very hard. And Mr. Chauvin's attorney went too far. He did what we call opening the door to something that really hurt him. That tape you just played of Darnella speaking about how she is haunted by her failure to do more to help protect Mr. Floyd is an example of the defense attorney opening the door and inviting that redirect examination that was so emotional and so compelling. What did the defense attorney do wrong? He asked Darnella on cross-examination whether the fact that she took a video of the incident and the fact that it went viral, whether that changed her life. That permitted the prosecutor to get back up on redirect, a second shot at something that would not have been relevant or admissible earlier, and say to her, okay, you were just asked about how your life has changed. How has your life changed? And that led to the clip you just played, Ayman. So it was a mistake by the defense attorney to open the door and to permit that redirect by the prosecution that led to that very compelling testimony by Darnella. She is haunted by the fact that she didn't do more. She's not at fault. She didn't do anything wrong. She thinks she did. And I can tell you that will resonate with the jury.
Yeah, I was going to say anyone who might think that she benefited from that is sadly mistaken when you hear how much emotion she has had to endure as a result of it. Joyce, one of the other testimonies that we heard today, a witness 9 years old. This is obviously a very delicate balance for the prosecution to put someone that young on the stand. Walk us through the thinking. What's the purpose of putting someone that is 9 years old on this stand? What do you make of that witness?
It's always difficult to decide whether you put a young child on the witness stand. But in this case, it looks like it was a good call. It is, I think, very painful for us as lawyers to see a 9-year-old child process this. It is likely that she, at some point, felt strongly about testifying and being able to share her side of the story. And she's a very accurate eyewitness. She testifies to the fact that when the ambulance arrives, they actually have to remove Officer Chauvin from George Floyd. And it provides a compelling look. You know, children, when they see these situations, they testify very directly about what they observe without some of the filters that adults can employ. So they can be very direct witnesses. It was a good morning for the prosecution, Ayman, but I used to always tell my lawyers the prosecution has to convince every juror. They have to get unanimous agreement among the jury to convict. So even with a good morning like this, you can't get too far ahead of yourself as prosecutions.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And to that point, Shaq, let's talk about the jurors for a moment, because obviously we don't get to see them. We don't get to see their reactions. There are observers in that courtroom, including some of the pool reporters. What are you hearing from the reporters inside the courtroom that we're not seeing on TV? Not just about the jurors, but the general atmospherics of how today played out.
Right. And just to recap, I mean, we use that term pool reporters. This is a rotating group of reporters. 2 of them are allowed in the courtroom at a time. It rotates between different networks and different newspapers. And those are the accounts that we're relying on for this. So pardon me as I read a couple of the notes right now. I mentioned how they reacted to Darnella's testimony and how impacted they were, and how one reporter said there were many noticeable expressions of sympathy when she talked about apologizing to Floyd for not doing more. Just generally, though, what we've been seeing is that they've been taking notes. They've been engaged. They've been looking at the video. They've been apparently the chairs have wheels on them, so sometimes they swivel back and forth as different witnesses are answering questions from the prosecution. You also get a sense that during those sidebars, when the judge puts on the headset and when the attorneys are conferring with the judge privately, that they're actually talking to one another, that there's some level of familiarity, as one of the pool reporters expresses there. So there's some camaraderie or some level of comfort that they're building with one another during those moments when there is no testimony and there's that uncertainty. I know it's a little bit awkward when we watch the testimony sometimes and there's that silence there. So that's what's going on inside the courtroom. I know yesterday, for example, we saw once it got to the afternoon session, we got reports that some jurors were bringing in coffee or cups of that appeared to be coffee. No one examined what was in them, but cups of coffee cups that they came and put on their desks. So that's kind of what you're getting as this jury is paying attention. Of course, they are the focus of this trial. That is who the prosecution, the defense, and even some of the witnesses, as we saw, are focused on as this trial continues. Ayman.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.